Hey everyone, I'm Amethyst, and today I will be drawing my persona as different fantasy species. Now, this was actually inspired by two Minecraft mods that I've been playing called Origins and Medieval Origins. It's basically just a set of mods that gives you different abilities or detriments based around certain fantasy creatures. I've been enjoying this mod alongside some others and thought it would be fun to draw myself as some of these origins. The first origin I picked is the one I'm playing on right now, which is the Pixie, and it's honestly pretty interesting, especially since it makes you so small. Also, you can fly, although I do find it weird that there's a stamina bar that comes with it. I don't really think it makes sense. As a humanoid creature that's tiny and has short legs, you would think that flying would be their main mode of transportation. It'd be something akin to walking for humans, which we can do for long periods of time, as opposed to the measly 30-ish seconds you get as a pixie flying. But gameplay-wise, I suppose infinite flight would be kind of overpowered. So, according to the little info page you get when you're selecting your origin, a pixie is a whimsical but mischievous creature who's simultaneously a troublemaker and a harbinger of good. Although associated with good luck, the pixie has many tales surrounding it that causes people, such as villagers, to refuse to interact with them. And believe me, it's bad. Even the children won't talk to a pixie. Due to their small size of 9 inches, pixies have very little health, but because of their wings, they can hover, fly, and don't get hurt when falling from heights. I used this as my basis for this first design. For the pose, I was going for something that was interesting and would show off the pixie's mischievous nature and the magic that comes with it. The pose I chose was slightly inspired by something I found on Pinterest. As always, I started with drawing my head and face. I was referencing this image from the mod for my rendition. These thumbnail images were the main catalyst for me wanting to draw my own actually. However, even when looking closely at it, it can be a little hard to make out specific details. This part was especially confusing. I wasn't sure if they were ears or extra wings or fish fins or whatever. I decided to just make them ears, just weirdly shaped ones. For my face, I gave myself a mischievous expression. I wanted the final product to look like I was casting some kind of negative spell on the discriminatory villagers. Nothing too harmful, of course, just something to teach them a lesson. I also pushed my eyes down a bit and made them a bit bigger because something just tells me that pixies would have bigger eyes. And I couldn't decide whether I wanted to add in my glasses or not. Fun fact, I don't actually need to wear glasses. I just like how they look. So technically, my persona doesn't need to have glasses. I was afraid that she would look too different without them, but I was also worried that the addition of glasses would cover up her expression. It didn't end up mattering in the end because it turns out I completely forgot about the glasses. For my hair, I debated between keeping my usual style or changing it. I thought it would be cool to change it, but I couldn't think of any other curly hairstyles I thought would fit, so I just went with my normal hairstyle. When it comes to the actual pixie parts of the design, I gave myself wings and antennae. The antennae aren't in the original pixie thumbnail, I just thought it would be cool to add. The wings aren't in the thumbnail either, but they do appear in-game, which is cool because not all origins alter your physical appearance in-game. I tried to imitate what the wings looked like, but just like with the ear things, I found it difficult. Eventually, I just settled on insect wings. I think that was basically what the mod was going for anyway. Taking into account the size of the pixie, I tried to think of what type of materials would be easiest for a pixie to make clothes out of. The obvious choice was plants. And no, I didn't think this deeply about the clothes for my other two designs. Not sure why. But anyway, I got to clothes designing. I used leaves for the sleeves and chest, petals for the skirt, and vines to tie everything together. The great thing about the Origins Pixie is that it's a purple magenta color, which fits my already established color scheme pretty well. So the skin color of a pixie matched perfectly with the colors of my persona's hair, and all of that looked great with the green and purple clothes. I originally wanted to add more contrast in the skirt, but that would require me to lighten it, and I liked the overall dark look I had. I applied that same mindset to the color of the background, which went from a light blue to a dark one. And then for the wings, I just used the same colors used in-game. For all the magical effects, I played around with some of Procreate's new brushes until I came up with something I liked. And that's all for this piece. I had a lot of fun drawing this. I really like the colors and overall look. The clothes I designed are maybe not the best, but it's kind of hard to work with plants only. Hopefully those villagers now know not to mess with me. The next lovely origin I drew myself as is the Siren. I've always liked the idea of sirens, and I feel like the general public does as well. I've seen so many takes on the siren idea, with not all of them actually including half-fish people. The idea of enchanting or controlling someone with your voice is just fascinating, and it certainly makes for some great villains. But anyway, in the Origins mod, the siren is described as being irresistibly beautiful with an ensnaring aura and a powerful siren song that pacifies others. And of course, as sea creatures, they can breathe underwater and swim quickly through it. But that also means that they can't heal outside of water and are extremely sensitive to fire. I started out looking for poses I could draw my siren self in that would depict the iconic siren powers, but I couldn't find or think of anything I liked. I eventually decided on a non-singing pose, just something that would have me sort of half laying on a rock. You know, classic fish person stuff. Once again, I wasn't sure what these things were. They were either fin ears or really long eyelashes. Again, I just decided to make them into ears. That made the most sense to me. And then I also gave myself siren eyes for obvious reasons. I just overall tried to give the design a sharp look to make myself look more dangerous. Sirens are dangerous predators after all. This pose was something I struggled a lot with for this piece. You'll see me redraw it several times. I just couldn't get it to look the way I wanted it to for the longest time. I ultimately just decided to take a break from it and come back to it later. Of course, I was able to draw it pretty easily after coming back. It's funny how that works. Coming back to it later also brought me a new perspective on the face. The eyes were too wide and too low, and the nose was too short, so I fixed it and I thought it looked much better. Then I added some extra fins around my tail and body, again trying to make it appear sharp and dangerous. For the hair in this piece, I actually tried out a different hairstyle. Since the reference thumbnail looks like it has longer hair, I tried to do the same with myself, but instead of just drawing the typical long straight hair, I drew it more wavy. It's not a stereotypical curly hairstyle, but my hair can look this way if I style it a certain way. Although I would never grow my hair this long. It would be too much of a hassle. When it comes to the clothes, I didn't just want to give myself a bra and call it a day. I wanted to keep these outfits relatively close to something I would be fine wearing myself, and I don't like wearing revealing clothing. But at the same time, wearing less clothes as a humanoid sea creature makes sense. Fewer clothes mean less drag, which allows sea creatures to more easily glide through the water. So realistically, sirens and mermaids wouldn't wear clothes at all. In fact, they wouldn't look like people at all. They'd probably evolve to look more like manatees. But also, mermaids and sirens aren't real, so I can do whatever I want. When you really think about it, sirens and mermaids wouldn't really need to cut through the water like other sea creatures because their greatest strength would be the same as humans, and that's our brains. Humans aren't exactly as best physically adapted as other animals are, but we're still doing relatively well as a species because of our brilliant minds. So I don't think mermaids and sirens necessarily need to be evolutionarily correct. Besides, sirens don't need to chase their prey chases them. But tangent aside, coming up with clothes was quite difficult for me. I went through a few options before finally settling on a combination of them, and then I added random details to make it look more interesting. This time I actually remembered to add my glasses. This didn't take away from the expression I was trying to depict, so I had no problem with keeping them in. For the colors, I opted to keep the color scheme for my hair and clothes. At that point, I felt like the design was really starting to deviate from looking like me. So although I wanted to give myself blue hair like in the thumbnail, I just resolved to keep the blue to the siren-y parts. I didn't originally plan on making any backgrounds for any of my pieces, but I ended up making one for this piece anyway. It just doesn't really make sense to have a siren just floating in space when it looks like she's leaning on something. I guess I could have drawn myself just swimming normally to fix this issue, but I was too late at that point. So I drew a rock for me to lean on and an ocean around me. I tried not to spend too much time on the background as I still had one more piece I needed to draw. It still ended up taking longer than I would have liked, but at least it looks nice. I tried to keep the overall vibe of the piece more dark and gloomy to really sell the evil nature of the siren. But the piece didn't look colorful enough to me, so I went back in and added a brighter blue color to the surrounding water. And that's it for this piece. I don't like this one as much as my Pixie one. Probably because it's not nearly as saturated and colorful. I still think it looks pretty pleasant overall. The final origin I decided to draw myself as was the Arachnae, which is basically just a spider-human hybrid. The mod describes it as a grotesque amalgamation of spider and human, so when I booted up my Minecraft to test out this origin, I was sorely disappointed to see that my character was neither grotesque nor an amalgamation. So I decided to do it myself, though I'm not sure if the final product would be considered grotesque. Anyway, the Arachnae has venomous fangs, bristled feet to climb walls, many eyes to let them see clearly, less health, and a bottomless stomach. They can spin webs and are carnivores. Due to their exoskeleton, however, Arachnae are more vulnerable to damage and find it hard to wear armor. After choosing a pose, I began with the face, not only giving myself black eyes, but multiple eyes. I knew for this design I had to give myself a spider body for the lower half. I mean, I'm not sure how I could get more like an amalgamation than that. I was also glad that I wouldn't have to draw the entirety of the human body. Not that hips, legs, and feet are particularly hard to draw for me. I was just feeling lazy, I guess. I did struggle quite a bit with the spider legs nonetheless. I'm pretty scared of spiders in real life, so I tried to limit my references to drawings of spiders and spider OCs. I ended up making a lot of little adjustments before settling on one that finally looked right. The way I was doing it before was completely unbalanced. For one thing, I was placing the legs near the back or butt of the spider body, but if you look at an actual spider, the legs are closer to the front. Also, there's usually one pair of legs angled in front of the body for balance reasons, I assume. I was also making the legs pointy, which is stylistically fine, but I thought it looked weird. And for some reason, I only gave each leg one joint at first, but I fixed it all later, don't worry. The pose was something I wasn't very sure about. I just came up with something random the day before I started drawing this. I was mostly unsure about the arm positions. It's pretty difficult to find things for 4 arms to do. How would 4 arms really work? Where would the second pair of arms come out of? What do you do with them? Where do you put them? Do you just let the second pair of arms hang with the first pair? Then they'd be constantly brushing against each other, which I feel like would be uncomfortable. All important questions. I played around with different secondary arm poses until I stumbled upon something I sort of liked. I did consider getting rid of the second pair of arms in favor of another pair of legs, but 4 arms felt more like an abomination, so I stuck with it. I decided on a pose where I have one hand waving and the other over my chest. Then I adjusted the proportions a bit to make myself look bigger and taller. Partially because I am fairly tall in real life, but also because when it comes to spiders, the bigger, the scarier. Like I said before, I'm pretty scared of spiders, specifically the big ones. But I feel like seeing a spider woman that's taller than the average human would be terrifying for even the spider lovers. For the hair, once again, I wanted to try a different hairstyle. At first, I thought about doing pigtails, but that would be too similar to my other spider OC, Maria. So I chose braids instead. I began with sketching out where they would go, but later on used my braid brush to draw in the actual braids. I picked braids because it gave the hair an overall slick look, which I felt looked good for a spider-human hybrid. Also, fun fact, one of my alternate persona designs had braids. She looks pretty different from the one I ended up going with. Very serious. Then I added glasses. Try not to think too much about how glasses work on a creature with 8 eyes. I don't really know either. I added a moon to my spider backside, although it's hard to see the moon shape from the side. I gave myself pointy fingers and skin that fades to black at the edges. I thought it would be a cool and interesting addition. And for the colors, I basically just used my persona's colors. And for this design, I pretty much forgot I was supposed to be referencing the Origins thumbnail. Probably because I drew this one a few days after drawing the first 2. I also forgot some features about the Arachnae, and only realized as I started writing this portion of the script. So after technically finishing, I went back in to add bristles for the legs and a cobweb pattern to the background. And that's all for the Arachnae me. This one is probably my least favorite of the 3. It's not because of the design necessarily. Maybe it's the colors? I'm not entirely sure what I don't like about it. Maybe it's just not visually interesting or bright enough for me. But anyway, that's all I have for you today. Here are the drawings again. Thank you so much for watching, and please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already to see more of this kind of content. And if you're interested in more of my art, feel free to follow me on Instagram. The link's in the description. Take care and farewell.